Okay. Thank you. If it's bothering when I'm like,
Hello everyone, I'm Kumar Dattani and I welcome you to today's Inside Am webinar. I'm going to be your host this evening. We are joined here by two very special product management experts. But before I introduce them, let me sort of set an agenda for this particular webinar. I mean, there's no doubt, right, that product management is one of the most exciting and challenging fields out there today. Because consumer preferences are changing every other day, new products are being launched, and to give a healthy competition, right, to each and every product. And all of this together is driving large-scale innovation in this domain. But product managers are also in demand, right? I mean, there are about 50,000 job opportunities in product management right now across all job portals, and it definitely pays well. But today we are going to talk about one of the most debatable topics in product management circles, and that's is and to I mean there are multiple examples of product managers with tech backgrounds and management backgrounds, but which one trumps the other, and are there any other alternatives, like going from UI UX role to a product manager role, or a strategy role to a product manager role? And to give us some insights into this conundrum, and to answer your questions, we have with us two product management experts, Anusha and Evan. So Anusha has worked in product management roles across some of the key marquee brand names like Protonn, Flipkart, etc. She's an IIM Indore and NIT Surat alumna, and we're glad to have you with us this evening, Anusha. And Evan brags about leading some of the key projects at Microsoft, Atlassian across India, Prague, US, even like Microsoft Teams. He's an NIT Karnataka alumnus, and thank you so much today, for joining us today, Evan.
Right? Thank you for hosting us. Yes.
Yes. So let me just start, by putting the first question, forward to you guys. I mean, we've received obviously a lot of queries, but I just like to start at this key juncture, where we talk about, I mean, I read about this, a McKinsey report, showed that, major firms across the globe, have started their, accelerated their tech adoption and their started building their tech stack almost by 5 years, and that's certainly due to the pandemic and how consumer preferences have changed. Now, due to this trend or due to other trends, right? I mean, consumers are also adopting tech equally fast. So how has the role of a product manager changed over the years, and how do you see it, as to 5 years before and now?
You want to take that, Kumar?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you guys. Evan, Anusha, Evan, you can start with
maybe I'll start with a little bit, and then I'll hand it over to you, Anusha. Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us live today. Actually, just before getting into the evolution, just a personal background. I joined as a product manager right out of college back in 2011, where honestly, I didn't even know what product management stood for. And from 2011 to 2022, the term and the role has, I think, first become changed. I won't say changed quite a bit. It's become very prevalent in the industry. Everyone now, there are books written on it, which is phenomenally wonderful. There's just so much coursework and material present that allows anyone and everyone to actually train intentionally to become a product manager, which is great. From an evolution standpoint, personally, I think product management is all about product first thinking, which is a pretty generic thinking. It's not related to an industry, or it's not 100% not just applicable to tech. It's applicable to pretty much all industries out there. And when I say product first thinking, what I mean here is just thinking from a customer perspective, thinking from actually what problems are you trying to solve before actually jumping into solving them. And every industry that's out there today is trying to solve a customer problem. And the question is, how do you approach solving those problems? And for me, that's the fundamental thing. And from an evolution standpoint, what I see is it's just come to the forefront. So, tech just brought it to the forefront, from a tech perspective. But now, I think we were, in the part of my past role, we were talking to some analysts at Gartner, and it was pretty evident that literally every company that's going to a consulting firm is asking pretty much, how do we change our working style to be product first? Whether it's a toothpaste company, whether it's a software company, whether it's I don't know, take any example in your mind. But fundamentally everyone's trying to put the product first, think about what's the problem it's trying to solve, and figure out a way to iteratively improve the product so that they can actually solve the customer problem better. And what's product management as a role? That's pretty much what I think we do. That's what I believe I do. So maybe there are others who think differently, but at least I think any problem that I take, I apply that lens and look at it. So over to you, Anusha.
Yeah, just touching on the topic of how I ended up in product management, I think I sort of sought it out. At least that's how I like to think about it, right? So I went into consulting, did not connect with it enough, and probably I wasn't that good at it. Moved from there to design, right? Figured design was too far away from, core tech and sort of core strategy. And I wanted to be sort of in the middle of all of that, the typical Venn diagram that people draw. And I moved into product. I think this is about almost 9 years ago now. So when I think about the evolution of product, right, I think a couple of things have happened. One is, like Evan was talking about, it has come to the forefront. And when we say it has come to the forefront, what it means is there's a strong leadership role that PMs are also expected to take now, right? So people have started thinking about product strategy as well. It's not just about company strategy, right? It's about how can products start to contribute to building those moats around what makes a company get ahead and stay ahead. Right, but how has it changed? Very specifically to what was being talked about, being asked, which is with evolving, consumer expectations. How has it changed? I'm not sure if there is a good answer to it, because honestly, that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to evolve with consumer expectations. We're supposed to be able to catch them quickly and, actually be able to build for it. So I would say, rather than evolving with consumer expectations and changes in behavior, as a profession, it has evolved a lot, and hence it has moved from something that sort of began at an analyst level and a here and now level to companies starting to think more about scalability, exponential scalability being at the core of it. That's what I think differentiates a product first company from, let's say, anything else first company, right? Which is whatever you do has that exponential impact. And because that it started becoming more mainstream, now you start thinking about, it's not just about what are we doing with small products, but like I was talking about, right? What does it mean to then become truly product first? So I think that's the evolution that has happened, right? Where product was a good to have to a absolutely must have in almost every context.
Right. And I think both of you touched upon this in sort of some way or the other. But so I was also thinking about this, how because okay, obviously the PM role has changed over the years, but the kind of changes that happen every year, and like sort of some changes used to happen about 10 years, things used to change quite slowly, but the things have rapidly started evolving, and it's going to take a little while for product managers to adjust to the new kind of environment out there. So how do product managers actually keep up with these changing trends, and how do they how do you guys and basically keep up with everything?
How do we
you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I think the core of product building again is you're always looking at inside out data, as well as trying to keep a track of outside in trends, market landscape, what's relevant, right? That's, I mean, if you want to be true to building for the customer, you have to sort of understand that, right? Otherwise, you end up like there's this adjacent product that will suddenly become very big, and you'll have missed out on it because you didn't notice it, or you didn't look at your stakeholder map closely enough. And so I think either if we are doing it, we are doing a job. If we are not, I think keeping our eye out on what is happening in the market, like soon we are going to be out of our job. So it's important. How do we do it? I think I try to just, I'll break it down into two parts, right? One is, what do I do just to be good at my specific role in my specific industry, right? So hygiene things are, voice of customer, keeping a track on it, keeping a track of market share, keeping a track of very specific trends around what my competitors are doing. and how is my specific landscape changing in terms of, let's say, what are the new companies coming up, right? Who's got new rounds of funding, right? So keeping in touch with the entire breadth of topics across engineering, marketing, fundraising, right? The better things are the smaller things like VOC, right? Ensuring that there's good hygiene on it. And I think at a broader scale, I'm just somebody who likes to get excited about the new things out there, right? So of course, I'll get excited about the fact that Instagram has just launched an NFT platform, right? So that's something that you slowly tend to become just because I think of the peer group around you. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Anusha said, I'll add like maybe some emphasis on some points. One is this keeping track of what's going on, and I think she's covered a lot of the things already. Like there are a lot of newsletters, like very good people who are specialized in your area, whichever domain you're working on, who can give you a lot of specialized content on what's happening in the market, what's cutting edge in the market. I think the point that I'll go deeper on is the customers. Like it's funny how, like, for me personally, in my experience, customers have been the one who have kept me on the edge of pretty much everything I do, primarily because there are definitely trends that you can get from I think Anusha touched on the voice of the customer. I'm just going deeper on that because there's definitely trends that you can get from other experts and analysts and looking at keynotes and so on and so forth on the internet, which is already stuff that has come up. But I think a good product manager should be able to figure out what's not come up and it's about to come up. And these are the trends which have not yet evolved, but I think something that you think, this is where intuition and as a product manager, how do you kind of get ahead of the curve? And the only point which has stuck with me, or what I've resonated with a lot, is the only way you get ahead of the curve is through talking to customers, like living their life. Whoever is your user of the product, just forming connections, being their friends, basically. Because at the end of the day, you want to know exactly the pain that they are going through, because if 20 of your customers are going through a pain, there is something to be solved for. And that's how you get ahead of the curve, because they have a pain today because it's not being solved for. No company in the world is solving that problem today. And the question then comes back to you. If 20 of them are having that problem, is it big enough to solve? And if it aligns with your business goals, well, that's your opportunity. That's how you get ahead and set a new trend, basically. So I think I think everything else that Anusha said is super important. I'm just going deeper on this because personally, I think I align a lot with using the voice of the customer to kind of stay connected. And when I say customer, this is not some super hard person to get to. Like anyone and everyone, every friend, family of yours is a customer, depending on the product that you're working on. So,
right, interesting. And so, I mean, all of this will also depend upon your knowledge of the industry, right? And you both have personally worked across various industries. You've worked in e-commerce, you've worked in SaaS, and so what has been your experience personally? I mean, what are some of the most exciting industries to work in actually? And as a product manager, because, yes, obviously the customer will remain the same, consumer behavior will remain the same, but it's obviously necessary to also understand the industry at a depth. And how does it change your perspective as a product manager?
See, there, I think one is, there are two things that come into what kind of a product manager you are, right? One is, what are the core skill sets and adjacent skill sets you bring to the table, right? For example, somebody might be a great platform PM, somebody might be a great consumer/stakeholder PM, somebody might be a great growth PM, right? So eventually, over a period of time, you will figure out where you fit in or what you like doing. The second thing that you are talking about then is industry, right? So it overlaps in interesting ways. So for example, right now, there might be industries where growth is more important, right? There'll be mature industries where platforms will get more important. So it is fun to be in the latest and greatest industry, right? But that also means you're going through a lot of ups and downs. You never know what's going to work out, what's not going to work out, right? You might join a startup, right, where you may or may not have the right kind of product mentorship, but you should know what you're in for. So having interest is one thing, but taking career decisions based on what seems to be hot in the market, is an entirely different thing altogether. So fundraisers are a different story. Focusing on cores is different story, right? So if you're an early PM, you should be in a place where you have the right people around you to mentor you, right? And for you to have that space to figure out what kind of a PM you want to become, right? Versus if you're a PM with a lot of experience, right? And or if you're somebody who loves to take a risk, right? Then it's the right thing for you to go and jump. And if you have a passion for the industry, so don't go and, go join a Web3 company just because it sounds like it's the in thing. Because you might just end up hating it, and you might be like, you know what, I actually want to do traditional financing. I want to be in traditional fintech. Right? So it's great to be in Web3 right now, of course. But see if there's a passion for it, or if you just want to be in the latest and greatest things, of course. Right? So that should be those. In my opinion, there should be very different sort of, what do you call it? It's not the same thing to be interested in, to be looking at the latest and greatest in the market, versus where you should be based on who you are, what your interests are, and where you are in your career path right now.
Right. So your priority should be personally, it should be personally stitched and, according to what your needs are, what your ambitions are. And
Absolutely.
I think that's very important, right?
Absolutely. The kind of PMs who love to do 0 to 1 and 1 to 10, right, are not the same people who like to build platforms. Right. And these are not just words that we use, but it truly, matches. There are people who love working with the marketing team and building out like growth projects, right? And they excel at it. They'll do like 1,000 experiments and figure out, what works. And they'll also figure out how to get really good at experimenting. But you'll also have people who would be able to think 5 years down the line, are very comfortable building platforms out, right? Platforms that will continue giving you ROI for years down the line, for decades down the line.
Right. What do you have in your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much aligned there in the sense that it depends on the person asking the question, pretty much. Like the fact, if you know the industry, if an industry excites you, go for it. Yeah, because I think you have an innate passion for that. And that doesn't have to be the latest, greatest by any means. Like, don't go by the trends, because trends come and go. Like, it could be the most traditional, most hottest, most startup-y, it just depends on where you're inclined towards going. And there's a reason for that, because you intuitively understand that space. And the more you intuitively understand that space, the easier it is for you to empathize with the customer. The easier it is for you to empathize with the customer, the easier product first thinking comes to you. If you put yourself in a position where you have no idea, which I did, honestly, in my recent job switch, when I switched from Microsoft to Atlassian, I just went from North Pole to South Pole. Like, it was a completely different company, completely different product domain, completely different everything. Now, I did that after 9 years of product experience. So I was confident in my craft. I just didn't know the domain. So I applied my energy towards the domain. But especially when you're starting off, when you're trying to figure out what product management is, and you're trying to figure out what the domain is, honestly, if you know what it is, go for it. If you don't know what it is, everything is equally good. Because fundamentally, it's the same thinking that you apply. So it's the mindset that you come in with, which is more important than actually the domain, in my opinion. Because if you're coming at it with a mindset to learn and grow, you'll just pick it up. And as Anusha said, you'll figure out where you fall. Because fundamentally, product management is like a skill combination. Like in Atlassian, we used to use this triangle of GM, artist, and scientist, which I think phenomenally represents the craft of product management, because these words are generic enough, and it's not, the goal is not to be in the center, to be honest. The goal is to be close to the center, striving towards the center, but you're still finding your niche towards one of the vertices. Because, and that's basically your intuition, your skill, like, what are you born with? And so if you're new to the craft, I would say the industry is, in my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, less relevant. More is just working on that mindset that you go in with and building the product first thinking and figuring out where in the triangle do you lie. And then ask yourself, is that current job giving you the right environment for you to grow towards the center? If yes, perfect. If no, now you know what to look for specific.
Right. So it's basically, sort of, exploiting your niche and, actually doing what you love and, kind of adding a personal flavor to the entire product, and that's really necessary, I think. Yeah. Right. So, right. So the next question, I think, is by Tilak, and, it's, what, it's a very, it's a question that you might have already heard of and, probably answered quite a few times, but, what does a day in the life of a product manager look like, and what are the responsibilities you do? I know it can go on and on, right? And I can see it by your faces, but let's, try and summarize this. Evan, do you want to go first? Or
yeah. I wish I could answer that question. I would be a very effective. I don't know. That's questionable. A day in a product man, it depends on this life cycle, honestly. Like when I was early on in my career, I kind of knew a lot more. Like, I think product management is one of those skills where, the more deeper you go into the career, the lesser you know what you're doing. Like, honestly, I feel like some days I've come to work, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? And then you go figure it out. And it's not a bad thing, honestly, because, the times when you know what you're doing is the time that I get nervous because I'm like, I'm missing a blind spot somewhere. So there's a really good book. I forgot the name. It was written by the Intel CEO, Only the Paranoid Survive. I feel like it's very relevant to this role because I don't know, something that jived with me when I read that book is when everything is going well, everything in me is screaming, you're not looking everywhere, dude. You're not looking everywhere. So, get into work and you're figuring out what am I not seeing that's making me feel comfortable. So anyway, that's a little bit high level.
There's some L3 metric that's tanking, which is going to tank your L0 day after tomorrow.
Exactly, right? And I mean, you can look at it as anxiety creating or you look at it as a fun project because now it's like, I look at it as a fun thing because it's what kind of keeps the spice in your curries, like, where something just stands out. And that's the way I look at it. And so it's very hard to answer this question because it really depends on which domain, what kind of a PM you are. Like if you're a data-driven PM, then you're going to spend the day looking at dashboards and trying to find patterns and insights from there. If you're more artisty PM, you're going to be more creating mock-ups and working with your designers. If you're more GM, you're thinking about the revenue impact business, what you're doing. So it honestly just depends on what product and what you're looking at. So I want to give you a very crisp answer, but unfortunately, I'm not equipped to give you that.
Yeah.
I'll do a week, right? Because I cannot do a day. I just can't.
Right.
So there's 1/5 of the time which is almost dedicated to metrics and data, right? It could be sort of looking at what has happened. It could be projections. It could be, using data to look at the patterns, creating profiles, and trying to identify small nuggets of gold which you can, wherever you like, oh, here, my mini product or feature has attained PMF. Now how can I scale it up, right? Because it's working and it's no longer, a loss-making thing where I'm putting more effort into it and it's not really giving. Then there is about a couple of days of execution, right? So 2 days sort of in a week, think about it as execution focused, right? Depending on if you're an ICPM, then it'll be like you'll be working with the designers and developers and actually getting stuff done. If you're managing people, then some part of it will be, that L2 audit of what's happening, are things on track, what can I unblock, what are potential blockers that are going to come up, are we aligned, execution alignment. And think about 2 days of sort of planning for future, right? Which is, I'm here and now, but what about Q2? What about H2, right? What do I sort of need to put into motion to ensure that I have, let's say, for example, in Flipkart, October used to be the cycle, the time of strat refreshes, right? So I'll start planning from February onwards, which is February to March. Can I ramp up my customer VOC because I'll get one segment and I'll get one segment later again, right? Should I then start getting sort of market numbers, projections? What categories do I need to extra focus on, right? So things like that, right? For example, planning for Q2, H2, year end. So that's very roughly how I think about it. Of course, there are things that will come in which are bounces, which is there'll be some random metric which is time, so you'll have to do, spend extra time for it, right? So of course that buffer needs to exist, but roughly I like to think about it like this, right? So there's metrics time, there's execution time, and there's forward-looking time. How can I plan?
Right. And so Anusha, you also touched upon, there are a lot of unknown factors here, and Evan, you also touched upon that particular fact that you have, as a product manager, you have a lot of accountability. It's just minor fix here and there that you suggest and you probably execute is going to touch upon millions of lives, and so it's essentially a very high impact role, right? And so just a lot of our viewers are already drawn parallels to it with a strategy consultant, and a lot of people have been asking questions, specifically when I had this question, do product managers also face burnout, like consultants, and how similar is this a role to consulting role? And Anusha, you having already had some experience in that kind of a role, would you want to elaborate on that?
Specifically, I don't know how to tie consulting into this, honestly, right? Of course, there are specific consulting skills that come in, but you could say that for almost every role, right? Like in terms of there's marketing that plays in, there's engineering that plays in.
There's a lot of
depending
stakeholder management.
So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is this is something that you'll end up doing in almost every role. Right. The accountability bit of it, I think, is. So I was also looking at the comments and somebody who asked, hey, product management seems to be a lot of project management in India. So Evan, correct me if I'm wrong, but program managers are what is Microsoft
product managers
in Microsoft?
It's program management. It's called program management, but it's pretty much a blend of product.
Yeah.
It's mostly product. It depends on the team, to be very honest.
Yeah. So what I found is, ultimately, you have to be accountable for the execution, right? So program management kicks in, stakeholder management kicks in. Setup matters a lot. If you are in an early stage startup, right? And if you are senior enough, then you'll have to manage, you take accountability for all of it. If you are in a larger company, then there are people around, there are sort of, how do I put it? There are existing setups to sort of help you figure out how to go about it, right? Who do you reach out to in this case, right? There's tracking. What I've also seen over, the last few years of experience is that when the structure is not set up to help you succeed, then more of the stakeholder management sort of comes on you, right? Then you have to sort of play it by hand. But yeah.
Right.
I'll share my personal opinion on this. Burnout can be there in every job and cannot be there in every job as well. So I'll give you my personal example. Like, I've had a reasonably good career and I made it a priority never to get burnt out. So what I mean by that is, I think there was a tip that I got early on in my career from a VP at Microsoft. And he's like, you can do the same thing in 4 hours and you can do the same thing in 1 hour. You choose. It's a very simple line, but somehow I just understood it as, you can take any task and you can fill up an entire day with it. Or you can say, hey, right now I'm going to take a task and do 1 hour of this. And then wherever it is at the end of the 1 hour, I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to figure out if I need to work on it at a later point of time. So what I've observed with a lot of the people who work for me, who I worked with, is it's time management at the end of the day. And how much time are you kind of setting yourself up for? So I worked in India, I worked abroad. I actually worked majority of my career abroad. And I think I learned this when I went abroad, where it was like, people only worked 8 to 5. And they got way more done than people who were working from 8 o'clock and 9 to 9 o'clock. And I was like, how does this
4-hour workday is my favorite experiment.
Yeah. And honestly, it's just a mindset. It's nothing else. It's like, if you go into work saying, I'm going to work till 9 p.m. today, you are going to work till 9 p.m. today. And you are going to burn out because as a human being, you need to do a lot of other things to kind of stay balanced. And so I'm a triathlete. I travel a lot. I ski, I kayak. I do pretty much everything that's available to do outside of work. And I spend a lot of time with my family. I travel a lot. I do all of that and I'm still able to do product management. So, I mean, I can't really compare it to consultants. I have a friend who's a consultant at BCG and it's a different lifestyle. At least he represents a different lifestyle. But I also know consultants who have a phenomenally balanced life. So, that kind of begs me to question the concept of, again, and I'm going to put it back to the person who asked the question, which is, what do you want? And if you want a balanced work life, product management definitely can give you that. If you want to spend a lot of hours, like early on in my career, I did spend, I think, more hours than I think later on. But again, that was a choice. So I never felt burnt out. I was like, I wanted to spend those 2 additional hours in the evening because I thought I would get a lot of it early on in my days. And then there was a point where I was like, oh, maybe I don't need to. And then magically it just worked out. So then I was like, oh, if I can finish my work from 8 to 5 every day, perfect. And it was not like my productivity reduced, it's just my efficiency increased. And I think in India, one of the things that I observed when I came back to India after going abroad is, I think I had to tell a lot to my directs that I don't want you to work beyond 5. And I mean, that again, I'm not saying you'll get managers like this. I'm just saying you got to define your own boundaries and you can be a phenomenal product manager working limited hours in a day. So I don't think any job for that matter of fact, but in this case, specific to product management is, oh, you put in more hours, you get better. No, you get more effective, you get more efficient, you get better. That's a better way to kind of say the same statement. And so just think about how to make everything that you do 10x more efficient. You'll finish it much faster.
Right. Right. I think you also mentioned, a part of it where you also have, your own personal life. And if you're a product manager, I think it's, it's very evident that you also have to, manage your time well in your job as well. So, I mean, why not take it personally and, manage time well for your own personal life? And then
that's right.
Well, apply the skills, on your own personal lives. So, right. And so, interesting. So now,
I want to touch upon a small thing there, right?
Yeah.
I was talking about accountability, and like, to me, I started figuring out work-life balance as a product manager once I figured out accountability. Which is, while I'm accountable, I should figure out how to delegate accountability to the right people. Right? I'm not responsible for doing it all. I'm responsible for getting it all done. Right? So whether I do it or, I ask the engineering manager, hey, can you please take care of the weekly updates? Makes a difference. It might not be an easy conversation to do, but it's an important conversation to have. Right? Otherwise, as a product manager, I'm not going to scale.
100% agree with Anusha on this one, because it's pretty much what allowed, even in my personal career, to scale. And one more extra tip I'll give you is that conversation that you have with your stakeholders on how you delegate is, you got to create a win-win situation. No one's going to do it if you ask them to do it because, oh, I'm going to save time, so you do it instead. That logically will not work. But if you see, even creating a weekly report has a lot of merits. Even personally, like, I used to do it a lot. I actually continue to do it personally for myself, because fundamentally it gives you a structure of thinking about how is your team doing. And you've got to figure out how to phrase this to your other stakeholders in a way that actually they get value from it, and genuinely, not as a mind game. I'm not trying to like genuinely help them get better at what they do. And that way, when you share responsibility and accountability, it just becomes a lot more fun because you're doing it together, you're helping each other out, and no one is pointing fingers at anybody. You're doing it together. So I think plus 100 on what Anusha said, the best way to deal with this is play as a team. And that's the easiest way to scale.
Right. And so I think a lot of what you guys already talked about in this particular question, also answers the next question. And just please feel free to add anything that you think should be also pointed out. But the next question was basically by Srinivas. In the era of increasing number of launches, various products, and it's continuous evolution of a product, right? And what is a mindset that a PM should possess, in order to excel in any industry or any market or any product, right? And you obviously, both of you touched upon certain things here already in the previous answer, but do you want to add something to this?
I think for me, the one word that comes to mind is growth mindset. There's a phenomenal book written by Carol S. Dweck or something, and just Google it. It's called The Growth Mindset. I think it describes it really well. I'll try to summarize it. There is no end to this journey. I've been in this field for 10 years and I still don't think I'm a good product manager, because I don't think I ever will be, primarily because I think that's the fun. So each time you work on something, there's something new and you keep learning. You just keep learning. It's like this recursive loop, like, you call this reinforcement learning in some sense. All you're trying to do is become better every day. So I think the best mindset you can come in with is actually, looking back when I joined in 2011, I didn't even know what the title stood for. I'll be very honest with you. And that was my biggest strength, because then I didn't come in with expectations and everything I got was a blessing. Like everything was like, oh, that's a great opportunity. No, that's another great opportunity. Oh, that's another. That was just a prioritization of which opportunity of learning do I want to do today. And that just gave me this spiral of confidence and, the ability that I can learn anything. And especially in the market that we're in today, everything is changing. Yeah, like the technologies are changing, the coding languages are changing. Like, now there's a new metaverse coming up, like NFT platforms, crypto. You'll never get ahead of the curve if you start following a pattern where I need to know everything. Like, of course, you can't do everything in this world. Like, I joined Atlassian and they use Confluence for documentation, and I was just given this entire Confluence pages, and I was like, I spent a lot of time reading. I'm like, oh man, like this is impossible. Like I'm setting myself up to, if I had to start from learning everything and then start, it's impossible. So then I just changed it, like, okay, every day is going to be a learning, and go back to your roots, go back to starting your career at Microsoft. And then suddenly one day it just changed. So I think the best mindset, I would say, going into this role is read a book. It's phenomenal if you can, but if not, like, yeah, just, growth mindset is what I would say.
Right. So it's like sort of almost learn, unlearn, and relearn. It's constant cycle.
Yes.
It just goes
constant cycle. Like, it's the artist mind, right? You draw something, destroy it, and you repoint it, and you destroy it, and then the process becomes fun after some time. And initially, it's a little challenging, I agree, because it's a lot to absorb. But over time, you repeat the same process again and again, and suddenly you see yourself just exponentially getting better rather than incrementally getting better. And I think that makes a massive difference, because to your confidence, to how you project yourself, as well as, everything else that you do.
Right. What do you, Anusha? Your thoughts?
I think so. Evan covered a bunch of things. The only thing I would add is just keep an eye out on yourself, right? If you don't learn from what you're doing well and what you're not doing well now, right? If you're not able to build the right awareness about yourself, and I think this applies everywhere, not just in this area, right? But I'll tell you about why I'm coming here specifically again. Then you'll not have foundation to build up on top of. So you got to keep looking at, if there are 5 core skill sets that I need to think about, right? And then there's a domain that I have to think about. Where am I on it again and again? For me, my example was when I was moving from a purely IC role to, starting people management, right? I realized that communication had become exponentially important, right? And I had bypassed the need for, scaling up on written communication by managing with, managing with just conversations, right? Because I knew people. We were, of course, sitting in an office environment. I'd get stuff done, of course, right? And I had stopped really looking at, what am I good at? Where are my areas of improving? And because I'd stopped doing that, and I was focusing purely on the output, right? Like, this is the basics of input metrics versus output metrics. I hit a place where suddenly, right, communication on multiple aspects was important, and that skill had not grown with me, right? So then I realized that you do have to keep looking at your core basics again and again, and are you growing on them the way you should be growing, or are you taking a shortcut? It's okay to take shortcuts, but you should go back and sort of fix them when you're doing that, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I'll sort of put there.
And that's quite deep, actually, because I mean, it's also important to touch base upon your roots, and it's where you basically come from, right? And it's what lends you the credibility as a product manager, right? It's for, I think it's true for any role. It's what gives you the skills, right? And right, I mean, so now, obviously a lot of people had asked about this, and let's address the elephant in the room, the topic that this webinar is for, and is, sort of the tech and the coding knowledge really necessary for a product management role, or is MBA management is an absolute must for this role? I mean, because this role marries a lot of things, right? And it's kind of right in between a lot of things, as you mentioned. But what are the skills that are really, really necessary? Is it the coding part? Is the management part? Is the consumer understanding part?
So I think no, neither are really necessary to start with, right? There are areas where you will lean towards depending on what you have come to the role with. If you have come from a marketing background, growth might be easier. If you are coming from a tech background, platform might be easier. But that's also if you're coming from a specific part of the tech background. Like, for example, if you are coming from a data platform, let us say, right? If you are a CA, for example, accounting might just be easier because you understand the domain. It's basically there's a product core skill set, there is an area skill set, and there is a sort of domain, right? Which is like edtech, accounting, product.
Right.
Three things coming together. And if you have knowledge in either one of them, then it becomes easier to sort of move horizontally, right? But is it necessary? No. Why do people think it is necessary? Because those were typically the routes by which you could get into product management before, right? Which is, let's say you're at Microsoft or you're at Google, you're an engineer, and you can move to product management from there in established companies, right? We used to have similar programs in a bunch of places, or from MBA colleges, because people would come and directly hire from there. So that's why it is two standard routes. But are they the only routes? Definitely not. There's, a bunch of programs cropping up inside colleges, right? You have one right now. And will it give you an advantage? Of course, it will give you an advantage in some areas. Doesn't mean that if it's in a CA who's moving to, let's say, core consumer behavior PM role, they're going to be able to bring something from there, right? So I think,
I think each of them are necessary, and yet none of them are absolutely necessary, right? And there are both ways to it. Right. Over to you, Evan. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think it's very much aligned because it's the same thing. I don't think either is necessary. Like, I don't have an MBA. I don't even know what they teach in MBA, and I don't plan to do it. But I think if you ask me, it's the initiative. Like so I set up the hiring pipeline and the setup in Bangalore for Atlassian. And the tip I can share is when you do resume shortlisting, what we look for is, have you gone outside of the norm to do anything? Do you have that initiative to go learn something new and convert it into something that was tangible? And you don't need any background for this. You just need a very strong desire and a will to go learn and convert your desire to something tangible. What I mean by something tangible is it could be an app. It could be an app that you create for yourself. Forget about the revenue and stuff. Or have you done something like, in your garden to create a mechanism to feed your pets? Or you see what I'm trying to say? Like, have you applied your thinking process to go and make something better for some customer? And the customer can be an animal, your parents, your grandparents, your anybody, and converted it into something tangible and measured how effective it was. See, we do this every day. It just happens at a very subconscious level. The question is, are you able to articulate what you've done and, the product intuition that you have into something? Because personally, that's what I look for. Because textbook knowledge helps a lot in giving you some baseline structures on, like, how to approach the role and, like, the different aspects of the role and so on and so forth. But what nobody teaches is mindsets and, like, this thought process of customer empathy. Like, how do you teach customer empathy? You can't teach customer empathy. You can only learn it through experience. Good design, eye for a good design is not something that can be taught. Like, you literally have to observe a lot of tons and tons of design and form your own subjective opinion on what's good and what's bad. The question is, people don't do that. They take other people's opinions and kind of make theirs. And that doesn't help you, especially when you have to create something very original in the company. So, like, I think, Kumar, you mentioned about creating your own niche, your own thing. And that only comes with initiative. And so, like, all the aspirants for here and as well as in the future, I would say, is like, find a place where you can be you and create something out of it using the product thinking. That will go a long ways in first giving you the confidence of even writing a resume in a way that's original in your own way. And second, that will stand out. There are a lot of people who look for these. I know my colleagues in Google, my friends in Google, the same in Microsoft. Like, I've done a bunch of hiring for Microsoft, and we look for these special standout things. And today with YouTube, like, you have a YouTube channel, you do stuff, like, it gives me confidence that, okay, you can get in front of people and talk. And that's a very important skill to have for a product manager. So you get what I'm trying to say? Like, I mean, all of this, all the textbook stuff is 100% important. I'm not negating one over the other, but I'm saying it all depends on which role you're on, and the management stuff will work better for you or the tech skill will work better for you. But I think what's common across both of these is just you're enrolling for a course and you're learning about it. That's initiative. Like, okay, I've done these things, but go beyond that, right? Like, I think even think about solving your regular stuff using a product mindset and see what can come out of it and being able to talk about it.
Right. And I think this is the right time to also bring this up. Anusha also mentioned this. I think so we at Altini are running this wonderful program, advanced product management, right? And we're running the batch 2, incidentally. Batch 1, we received like overwhelming positive response. It was rated 4.6 out of 5, and a lot of demand was coming in over the year. So we've decided to do it again. It's just loaded with different features, like we have 30 plus hours. We're learning from experts like Anusha and Evan. In fact, both of them are going to be a part of the program. We have you also get interview preparation, so you basically or know how to ace an interview. Whenever you are in a product management interview, you get to learn tools, and basically it's just, I mean, you have a lot of depth in this program, and also covers a lot of topics, so it's pretty comprehensive in that sense. It covers everything from UI, UX, analytics, data, stakeholder management, right? And we have some sessions from Aronath, who's also the product manager at senior product manager at booking.com, and then we have Anusha and Evan also are a part of it. And it's just we've received some amazing response over the past year about this, and people have benefited a lot from it. So we're just trying to do this again. We just hoping that a lot of you sign up, and a very special offer is running. I think you'll see the live chat you'll see the link in the live chat, and you should definitely sign up for it if you're interested in the learning product management, at least getting the hang of it, and actually getting real life insights from product managers, expert product managers like Evan and Anusha. And the link is in the live chat, I think, and is also in the description. So definitely do give this a look. Right. And so basically, I mean, we've obviously touched upon and we've discussed quite at length, what kind of mindset you need to go. There's always an ability, and it also is a fire to learn something new. But uh, but there are some certain skills which are absolutely core to product management, right? And there are different kinds of product managers. I understand that, but if you are if you just must prioritize any tech skills, right, that a product manager should absolutely have, even a working knowledge of it is fine. What are those skills? Evan,
Tech
do you want?
skills.
Yeah, tech skills. Yeah, coding knowledge. Is it really? I mean,
See, there's
obviously,
something called block thinking, like functional thinking,
right.
right? Which is if you have to, so I like to call it separation of control and execution,
Right.
right? Which is if you have to ask somebody to go get a glass of water,
Right.
right? And you want to break it down into blocks, you should be able to do that. That is critical. Like it's almost like writing an algorithm, but in words, right? Something that can be executed over and over again without you needing to be there. Right. So that is necessary, because when you think about how you design for your product, the functional design for your product, you have to think about which block has to be scalable, which block is interfacing with the user, right? And the reason I'm even putting it remotely into a tech skill is because I think this is very similar to sort of how engineers have to think in certain dimensions. But that's the only thing that even come remotely close to hard skills, hard tech skills is where I would put it.
Got it.
Right. Which is, but that's all I would call out.
Right. So, Evan, do you have any thoughts on this particular question?
Just improve my lighting a little bit so others can see me. Okay. Hold on. So same. I think coding, absolutely not something that I would say is needed. However, you need to be able to have or hold a conversation with your engineers. And for that, what I think Anusha described, block thinking is, is basically how do you talk about how things work. So you need to be able to understand how things work. Best way to learn that is just, go to Google, search for how does Google Photos work, or, how does any product that you like, how does it work? And there are enough people who've done breakdowns. And by just reading that, you get a sense of how do you see, it's not even like you need to understand the technical details. You just need to be able to have a conversation about how does this work? And okay, there's a sign-in page, okay, there's authentication, and then the user logs in, and then he sees something, and then he clicks on something, or these are UI pieces, they connect. So that, is it absolutely required? No. If you're in a company where the engineers can think like product managers, you don't even need this much, I would say. But in a lot of companies, I think, like, not everyone is at that same level of communication or even understanding. So having this as a skill is super useful, where you can just ask I think it's more important for you so that you can ask the right questions, and less important for you to actually dictate how it's built. Like, it's absolutely not important for you to know how it's built, but sometimes you want to ask the question of, hey, is this scalable? Like, even to ask the question of, is this scalable, you need to understand what scalability is. And be able to, you get what I'm trying to say? Like, is this
I'll
UI
give you an example
performant?
for it, right?
So go ahead,
when you think about scenarios where there are failure scenarios possible, let's say because there are two events which should happen sequentially, right? But the events are not happening sequentially just because there's a lag between the application and the server, right? If you understand these blocks and the fact that there's a possibility of a lag, right, you will design for an error scenario.
Right.
Or if you have a good engineering partner who will come and tell you, Anusha, this is a possible scenario, what should we do here? You'll design for it, right? Eventually you'll pick it up. Once somebody comes and asks you, Anusha, what should I do here? The next time you'll know to think about it. Right. So being able to learn very quickly from your partners is more important. But if you're able to do it, great, right? You'll think about what happens in a race around condition, for example, right? How do I design, let's say, a very happy failure scenario, right? Like you have that standard Dino game on Chrome, for example. Like, so there are some delights you can bring in early on, or you'll bring it later just because you'll find out because you have good stakeholders, hopefully. Hey, there's a question which is coming up in the comments which I want to talk about, okay? Which is, how do you handle failure? I think that's Lux, if I can read his name right? How do you manage failures as a PM? It's a very interesting question to me, because the way I want to answer it is, whether it's a success or a failure for every product, right? The most critical thing for a product manager is to figure out the RCA, right? Root cause analysis, which is, why did something succeed if it succeeded? Why did something fail if it failed? Because if I'm not able to take that learning forward, right, then that is a true failure. If I have shown something to 1,000 users and I'm not able to take away an insight from it, whether for a failure or success, then I'm not going to be able to stop the next thing or scale something up, right? So handling a failure where the hypothesis was good is not a problem, right? Because you're going to be able to do the right analysis, you're going to take something back from it. But if the failure has come from lack of a good, solid hypothesis, right, and you have not done the analysis around it and figure out the why, then that's a bigger failure, right? So failure happens. We are prepared for it. That's why we have things like A/B rollouts, right? We take guesses, or we say, hey, this is a strategic, plan where this is the amount of give we'll have. But not being able to take something from it is a bigger issue.
And I think there's always an element of uncertainty to, each of these features that you might roll out, or each of these products that you might roll out, and you can never be sure about it, right? But the important thing is to actually take something away from it, and as long as there's a value creation for you as well as the users, I think that's all that matters. And I think you put it very brilliantly. And so, I mean, so we also received a lot of questions again on how do you basically, sort of transition from different careers to product management role. I mean, there have been we've also already talked about this, but there are various routes to a product management role. I mean, from marketing, communications, and design is one route. Then there's another which is from a data analytics and strategy consulting point of view, because you already have the kind of a skill set. So there are a lot of translatable skill sets that you obviously have, and how can you basically bring those into a product management role?
How can you bring skill sets from adjacent roles into product management? Is that the question?
Right. And how do you basically make the transition? I mean, because a person who's probably had 2 years of strategy and consulting experience would be completely at odds, trying to figure out a way into product management, or a marketing person.
I'll go back to that initiative thing that I just shared, which is, see, honestly, the background is always helpful. Any background you come from brings perspective, brings a lot of learnings. So the only thing that you got to demonstrate is, are you able to translate? Like, I think what fundamentally when we hire, we're looking for is, are you able to translate your intuition to product? And that does not have to be like, I mean, yes, you're an engineer today. That's not stopping you from building your own product. Like, and the internet has evolved so much that honestly, like anyone with any idea can convert that idea to product in like exponentially reducing time period as we're going forward. Yeah. Like, so build it. Like, build it. It's okay if no one's using it, but build it, because once you build it, you're talking with experience. Otherwise, you're talking from concepts, and there's a big difference between these two. When you experience, you build something, you're instrumenting it, you're figuring out what success failure is before you build it. You're converting what you learn to practice in us. And the scale, honestly, when you're doing it for yourself, doesn't matter. You can do it for just your family, you can do it for yourself, you can create a to-do app for yourself. What you're doing in the process is you're emulating the product thinking, your customer empathy. What problem are you solving for? You're converting what you learned to action. That is going to go a long ways from your resume and how your resume looks. Because again, when you're shortlisting resumes, it's very difficult for us to find, like, if there are 5 people who come from consulting background, and if you write your consulting stuff only, nothing stands out. All are on the same playing field. But if one of them has this, I built this website that solves this problem, this is the number of users it got, even if the numbers is 5, that's okay. But the fact that you've done something with and shows that you want to go learn product management stands out massively from all the other consulting applicants that kind of apply for that job. Yeah. So my only message to anyone, whoever asks a question, is go be a product manager today. Don't wait to get the job. The job will happen naturally.
Yeah. Right, that's true. And I think that everyone needs to have that kind of a bias for action, and only then and then you'll be able to at least get hands-on experience. And that's absolutely true, right? And so also just wanted to there's this one very specific sort of a question that we've received, which is a very core product management oriented question, I think. Is the concept and the essence which defines the worth or utility of a product more important than the process followed in its development, implementation, and growth, right? And this question is by Abhinav.
I'll start there. Both are important. Like, you can't put one above the other. It's impossible. Like, you could have the best idea and a very bad implementation, and that will go completely down the drain. Or you could have the worst idea and a very simple idea, very like non-complicated idea. I mean, take case in point, WhatsApp. They didn't invent IM. They just took something that already existed, but their implementation, their performance, I still remember the days where I should judge the quality of the phone with how fast WhatsApp loads on it. Because I knew WhatsApp was perfect. It's only the phone's performance that is going to slow it down or not. And that's how much, even a message doesn't go, I check my network connectivity before I question WhatsApp's reliability. That's how perfect the execution of the app was. The concept is simple. There are many IM messages out there. So you see what I'm trying to say? Like, on the other hand, you can have phenomenal products like the HoloLens that Microsoft created. Beautiful concept, very bad implementation. $4,000. Who the hell is going to buy this? Like, I don't have the money to buy a $4,000 device. Again, I'm just giving a perspective of what the HoloLens is a great product. I'm not putting it down by any means, but you see, like, they have to go hand in hand. Like, you can't separate out idea or a concept from execution, because both are just kind of
intertwined. Yeah.
Anusha, please add.
I have a slightly different opinion. I think that there is a problem space, there's a solution space, and there's the execution. Execution is generally shared. By execution, I mean you figured out, the exacts of how you're going to manifest the solution to the problem. Concept to me exists in this solution space, right? And there's this problem space before, which is, I think my favorite example, which I've quoted before also, is there are a lot of calls coming to support, right? For where is my product? That is not the problem. You have to break it down further, right? And doing that is very critical. Concept comes much later to me, right? Identify the real problem. To take to-dos, for example. Is my problem that I have too long a list and I'm not able to prioritize? Or is my problem that I'm not able to remember all the things that I have to do? The two are very different problems, and you'll have very different ways to then solve for it.
Yeah.
If you say that I'm going to build a to-do list, then what is the to-do list going to do? Like, what is your success metric? Right? Is very different for prioritization problem versus remembering problem.
Right.
So I would in fact put it there, saying that the true skill is figuring out what the right problem to solve for is, and hence if you solve it, what will the world look like after you've solved it. And once you've that figured out, right, I feel that everything else almost flows from it. Of course, you have to have the creativity to figure out the best concept then, right? Like, what's the best version of it, right? How, but from that, MVP, I feel almost flows automatically. But getting to that, right, figuring out all the things that you need to look at to figure out the right problem statement at the right granularity, feel is at the crux of it.
Right. That's interesting. I mean, because it is obviously necessary to compartmentalize things, and put it in a certain space, and then try it, unblock, unravel things at one time and it just helps sort of break it down and understand it further, deep dive into the issue. And but is I mean, so we probably almost at the end of the webinar, and I'd just like to take one more question. And so now you essentially, both of you together, have decades of experience in product management, but combined, and so where does this path eventually lead to? Where does a product manager go from being a senior product manager and a product lead, and where does it lead to eventually, right? And that's a question that a lot of people have asked, especially I think Ameya has also mentioned.
Where could it lead to? I don't know where it will lead for me, but I can tell you what the standard paths have become.
Right.
There's of course CPO, there's founder, right? There are people who are very comfortable growing slowly because they're like, I love product and I'll be in this for decades. I'll go join a place like Google or, yeah, I think it's more about you rather than
there's a standard practice. There's no standard practice. I mean, it's always about you. Where do you want to lead it?
Yeah, but I think it's like, doing product, in my opinion. I'm going to get into a little sales pitch now because I love it passionately. It's like you're building a Swiss Army knife, I guess. So you're not one knife, you're many knives. And because you get exposure to pretty much the entire industry, like all roles in the company. You work with marketing, you work with finance, you work with engineering, you work with design, you work with leadership, you work with management, you work with everyone. Yeah. And in some sense, then you decide, hey, does that excite me more? Okay, then you know that now. The problem today in this world is people don't even know what they want. And I mean, not because of there's any problem. I didn't know what I wanted because I just didn't know it existed in the first place.
Right.
And I think what product management gave me is that exposure. Now, if you love product management, then sky's your limit. Yeah? You do product in everything that you do, like start your own company, join another company, do startup, do mains, and there's nothing wrong with anything. Like, I mean, there was a PM I worked with who was phenomenal. He was 22 years in Microsoft. He was a senior PM, but he was the best senior PM in the company. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. He's figured out his niche and his area where he's adding value, and he's adding enormous amount of value. Like, he's irreplaceable at what he does. And that's perfectly fine.
Right.
You want to jump around, become more Swiss Army knife types where you know exactly how to do what and when, perfectly fine. So I think at the end of the day, it goes back to what is it that you want to do. I think from a product management role, like if I had to compare it to any other thing, I would say, like, because of the nature of the role, you just get exposed to everyone in the company or all functions in the company. And even if you don't get exposed to as a part of it, you build the skill set to reach out. And because you build the communication skills, you build confidence, you build a way to form narratives. Like I think that's a fundamental thing that is it's a very hard skill to learn, but it's a very important skill to have, which is storytelling or narrative. Once you build that skill, honestly, you get empowered to talk to anybody. And then once you are able to talk to anybody, you can find your way, network, do whatever you want, and figure out what you want to do. So I think it's a great role for that. And then once you figure that out, sky's the limit.
Right. Just like you built a narrative with the Swiss Army knife. So that's a nice metaphor.
Yes.
Right. I think both of you also, eventually, both of your responses actually came to that. It's eventually what you want and what you actually, want to do in life, because you obviously have the exposure and you obviously have the skills to do whatever you want. But what is it that, really drives you? Right. And I think I had a wonderful time chatting with you both. And I think I can wait to do this again. And we'll obviously meet again during the advanced product management program. Guys, do sign up, and there's a special discount running and just for today. It's the link is in the description and in the live chat. Do sign up and definitely get a chance to learn from Manusha. Evan. This is just a small preview of the insights that these people can just provide you with, right, and leave you with. So, all right, thank you, Anusha. Thank you, Evan. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar and dedicating this time today evening, right? Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kumar, and all the listeners. Whoever, I'm on my phone, so I don't know how many people are listening, but yeah, thanks everyone for asking the questions, and keep asking questions. That's the best thing you can do. So just keep asking, and yeah, it was a pleasure being able to share any small insights that I've gathered with you.
Right. Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Anusha. Thank you so much. Bye.